An elderly man is seeking funding to buy a house for himself and his grandson. There was an elderly man seeking funding to buy a house for himself and his grandson. They might become homeless if they can't get it. But he faced repeated rejection from the bank employee until an unexpected party intervened to save him. The man did not give up on his commitment. Robert was a man dedicated to life. He had been a family man before, and things went well for a long time. But he always faced unexpected challenges. He reached the age of 80 and lost most of his family members. Those who remained lived thousands of miles away and hadn't contacted him in years. He often wondered, is this the reward for living a long life? He wished that he and his wife had passed away decades ago, for her absence caused him deep pain. Nevertheless, he wasn't completely alone, as his orphaned grandson Garfan lived with him in a rented apartment. And although their living conditions were not luxurious, staying together was the best way to survive in this city. Garfan was a hard-working young man, but he preferred spending time with his friends rather than with his grandfather. And although he never admitted it openly, Robert was aware of it. Nevertheless, it was clear that continuing to live together was the best solution given the circumstances they were going through. One of them would talk and take care of the groceries, while the other paid the rent. But as economic conditions became more difficult and rent prices increased, the threat of homelessness began to loom on the horizon. Robert decided to borrow money from the bank and add it to his small savings to buy a house for himself and his grandson. He was tired of this life, but he wasn't prepared for the obstacles he would face in carrying out his plan. Robert visited the bank repeatedly, but the employees kept rejecting him and turning down his application every time, claiming that his age did not allow him to get a loan. Even after taking an extra job as an on-demand driver, it still wasn't enough. He said to himself, "I have to try again. We can't keep living like this." The next morning, he got ready as best as an 80-year-old man could. He woke up at dawn to go to the bank near his apartment, carrying all his documents with him, including his letters, his job, and job offers from his 2 jobs, and his bank statement, and even his grandson's pay slips, hoping they would help him get the loan. When he arrived at the bank, he heard one of the employees say to his colleague, "Not again." This old man returned for the 2nd time this month. Frustrated, he went to the teller. The bored employee asked, "Requesting another loan?" Robert opened his brown envelope and replied, "Yes, I have all the documents." The employee looked at his colleagues as if asking for permission, then said sarcastically, "Unless you've gotten younger in the past month, it's still not possible to grant you the loan." Robert replied insistently, "I have a steady income and an excellent credit record." But the employee responded mockingly, "But you're still old." Despite his colleague's sarcasm, Robert insisted, but the employee rudely interrupted. Robert's face began to turn red with anger, and he felt like he might break down, but he remembered that his future and his grandson's future depended on this loan, so he decided to try again. He spoke in a tone full of challenge. "Please take a look at my documents. Age shouldn't be a deciding factor." One of the employees laughed and mockingly asked him, "And where did you learn that?" Robert looked around, hoping someone would step in to help him, then pleaded, "I might lose my apartment. Please help me. My grandson and I could end up homeless." But the response was even harsher, as one of the guards shouted, "Leave the place and let us help the others." Robert felt humiliated, but he had no choice but to leave, and as he walked out, he knew they were laughing at him. As he was walking back to his apartment, he bumped into a police officer who was patrolling the neighborhood. Robert apologized, saying, "I should have been more careful. I'm sorry." The officer smiled and said, "It's all right, but you seem distracted. Can I help you?" Robert hesitated at first, but he decided to open up to Officer Ken, who listened to him attentively. When Robert finished talking, Ken felt angry about the behavior of the bank employees. Ken took Robert with him to the bank and asked to see the manager. When they entered, he told the story, explaining how Robert had tried several times but was rejected because of his age. Anger flared in the manager's eyes, and he turned to the employees, saying, "Who refused this man?" But the employees pretended to be busy with their computers, and no one dared to admit it. The manager firmly asked, "Can anyone show me where the regulations say age is a reason to deny loans?" But no one dared to respond. The manager continued, If this behavior is repeated with any other customer, we will take legal action against the person responsible. Then the manager personally apologized to Robert and asked him to accompany him to his office to review his application himself. After 30 minutes, Robert came out with an irresistible smile. The loan had finally been approved. 3 weeks later, Robert and Gavin moved into their new apartment, far away from the nightmare of paying rent. Robert never forgot to thank the police officer, who was the reason his fate changed. The poor man who fulfilled his late grandmother's wish, only to discover a buried secret next to her house. Harry was a young man who loved his family deeply, and despite having little money, he decided to fulfill his late grandmother's wish by rebuilding her house. But he never expected that this decision would completely change the course of his life after his grandmother's death. Harry and his brother Walter were summoned to the lawyer's office. Walter was excited to find out their share of the inheritance, as he was sure their grandmother had left them a great fortune, especially since their grandfather, who passed away 5 years ago, had left all his wealth to her. But what happened surprised everyone. When the lawyer opened the will, he read in a calm voice, "My beloved grandchildren, your grandfather built this house when we started our life together, and I have lived all my memories in it. My last wish is for you to rebuild it so that it remains a witness to our love and our family's history." There was no mention of money, jewelry, or any other property. Walter sat in silence for a few moments, then asked angrily, "Is that all? Is there no money or valuable possessions?" The lawyer replied calmly, "She closed her bank accounts before her death, and she had nothing left except this house." Walter stood up, furious, and said to his brother, "If you want to rebuild this house, do whatever you want, but I won't take part in this foolishness." Then he left the place quickly. She said that and walked away quickly. Daryl watched her leave, and his expression was unreadable. Then he turned again toward the silver cup, where his reflection appeared on the shiny surface. He realized then that this day would be interesting. Daryl stood in the middle of the showroom, his hands in his pockets, his eyes wandering over the rows of cars. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but Susan's arrogant behavior was hard to ignore. The employees returned to their conversations, though Daryl occasionally noticed glances being cast his way. It was the kind of scrutiny he had grown used to over the years. Silent judgments and coded looks. Susan returned moments later, gripping her clipboard as if it were a shield. Her brisk steps and forced smile reflected her discomfort. Harry decided to carry out his grandmother's will. Even though he didn't have enough money, he used his savings and borrowed from a friend to renovate the house. While working on renovating the drainage system in the yard, he noticed a wooden plank buried in the ground. When he removed it, he discovered an opening leading to a narrow stone staircase that led to a small underground cellar. He lit a lamp and went down to find a large wooden box in the cellar, and on its surface, a message written in old handwriting. When he opened it, he read, "To my dear grandson Harry, if you are reading this letter, it means you have fulfilled your grandmother's will, and that makes me proud of you. I asked her to leave you this task because I knew you have a kind heart and would honor our wishes. This box contains something valuable for our family. Take it to the lawyer and he will tell you what to do. With all my love, your grandfather." Harry's body trembled with excitement and astonishment, and he carefully opened the box to find inside old jewelry, family photos, and old bank documents. He didn't wait long. He took the box and went straight to the lawyer's office. When the lawyer saw him, he smiled and said, "I always expected you to be the one to bring this message one day, not your brother." Then he opened the files and read them carefully before looking at Harry and saying, "This bank account your grandfather left contains $300,000. The surprise was greater than Harry had imagined. The lawyer explained that Harry had the right to manage the money, but he added, "Your grandfather wrote a simple condition. If the house is not rebuilt, the entire amount will be donated to charity." Despite needing the money, Harry decided to donate $100,000 to organizations that care for the elderly and kept the rest to finish rebuilding the house and pay off his debts. He didn't stop there. He also used part of the money to open a small business with his wife, a family cafe named after his grandmother, which became his stable source of income. A few months later, Harry and his wife moved into the renovated house and began a new life filled with comfort and stability. As for Walter, he couldn't believe what had happened, but he had lost his chance from the very beginning. In this way, Harry fulfilled his grandmother's wish, but he gained more than he ever expected. Stability, livelihood, peace of mind, and the lesson that the good we do comes back to us in ways better than we can imagine. After Harry and his wife moved into the renovated house, he felt as if he were living a dream he never thought would come true. It was more than a house. It witnessed the family's history and his struggle to fulfill his late grandmother's wish. Despite gaining wealth and stability, Harry never forgot his roots or the hardships he had endured. He became more compassionate toward the elderly who lacked support in their lives, so he continued donating to charities that helped them. He dedicated a corner in the cafe he established to be a warm place for the elderly in the neighborhood, where they could gather and talk, just as his grandmother used to do in the past. Confrontation with Walter and the decisive moment. After a few months, Walter visited Harry's house, not out of brotherhood, but out of curiosity and regret for giving up the opportunity. The two sat in the renovated living room, where Walter looked around in amazement, then said hesitantly, "I didn't think the house would look this wonderful. It seems I misjudged things." Harry smiled and said calmly, "It wasn't just about the house, but about the legacy our grandparents left us. Everything was written for us from the beginning, but we had to choose. You chose your path, and I chose mine." Walter sighed and felt ashamed of himself. He realized that he had been greedy and cared only about money, while Harry thought of his family and emotional legacy before anything else. A happy ending and new start. Despite their differences, Harry decided to forgive Walter, but he didn't intend to involve him in any of the wealth he had gained. Walter understood that, and knew that what he had lost would never return. But he decided to change. He offered Harry to work with him at the cafe to help him start a new life. Harry fulfilled his grandmother's dream, repaired his relationship with his brother, and started a new chapter in his life, filled with stability, success, and self-satisfaction. To be a living example that goodness and sincerity are never lost, and that fate always rewards those who deserve it. Daryl's eyes met hers, and his expression was calm but steady. "And what makes you think I'm not one of your target clients?" She hesitated. Susan hesitated for just a brief moment, then said, "I've been working here for a long time. I can tell when someone is out of their depth." "Out of their depth," Daryl repeated in a neutral, almost contemplative tone. "Interesting." A faint hesitation appeared in Susan's eyes, but she continued, "I'm just being honest. It's better to be straightforward than to have someone leave." Feeling disappointed, Daryl chuckled softly and shook his head slightly. "Honesty, right? I like that. How about letting me talk to the owner? Can we arrange that?" Susan's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise for the first time. "The owner?" "Yes," Daryl said in a light conversational tone. "I'd like to speak with him." Susan's lips trembled in a failed attempt to smile. "Well, that's not possible today. The owner doesn't come here just for regular visits. He's a busy man. I'm sure of that," Daryl said, nodding his head. "But maybe you could call him and let him know I'm here. I think he'd want to meet me." Susan's smile grew tighter, and she was starting to lose her patience. It was obvious. "Look, sir, I'm trying to be as polite as possible, but this is getting ridiculous for me. Other customers need help. If you're serious about buying a car, we can schedule a meeting with one of our sales consultants. Otherwise? What?" Daryl spoke calmly, but with an edge. Susan narrowed her eyes as anger built inside her. "Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to leave." Daryl stood, staring at her briefly as the showroom held its breath. Slowly, he pulled out his phone. "Fine," he said, scrolling through contacts. "I'll call myself." Susan blinked. "What are you doing?" "Calling the owner," Daryl replied, dismissing her. "It won't take long." Susan's confidence began to fade, replaced by clear confusion. The employees opened their mouths in astonishment and stopped working, watching the scene. Daryl raised his finger as if to say, Just a moment, and turned his back slightly. Yes, I'm at the agency. Everything's fine, just a misunderstanding. Can you let them know I'm here? He hung up, pocketed his phone, and turned to Susan. Will they be here soon? He said simply. Susan stared, mouth open. Who did you call? Daryl didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the employees who were watching anxiously. We'll find out soon, he said in a cheerful tone. Silence fell before the doors opened and a well-dressed man in a navy suit entered. Mr. Carter, he said, smiling and extending his hand. Daryl returned the handshake with a slight smile. Thank you for coming, Alex. Susan's expression turned to shock. Mr. Carter. Alex turned to her with a sharp, professional look. Susan, I see you've met the new owner of the agency. Susan stammered. I didn't know. Didn't know what? Daryl asked calmly. That someone like me could own this place? She stammered again. I'm sorry. Daryl raised his hand, interrupting her. That's fine. But ask yourself, if I weren't the owner, would you treat me with the same respect? Silence filled the room, and that was answer enough. Daryl smiled lightly. Let's all gather in the meeting room. We have an important discussion about how to run this agency. The employees gathered in the elegant meeting room, where the glass walls and modern design gave a sense of luxury, but today the atmosphere was charged with tension. Susan sat in the back, her usual confidence faded, while she kept gripping her notepad as if it were a shield protecting her. Daryl stood at the head of the table, calm and composed, commanding everyone's attention. Alex stood by the door, his hands clasped, watching the employees as they took their seats. Soft whispers quickly faded when Daryl cleared his throat to speak. He glanced around at those present before beginning to speak in a steady yet firm tone. Thank you for joining me on such short notice. For those who don't know me, my name is Daryl Carter. Since last month, I have become the new owner of Prestige Motors Agency. Soft whispers arose from some of the employees, ranging from surprise to confusion. Some tried to avoid looking at him, while Susan sank deeper into her seat. Daryl continued in a calm voice, but his words carried weight. I came today in simple clothes for a specific reason. I wanted to see how this agency operates when no one knows who I am. I wanted to feel what any potential client experiences when entering these doors. He paused for a moment, letting his words echo in their minds before continuing. What I experienced today was disappointing. I was judged not based on what I could offer, but on my appearance. And I'm not saying this to place blame, but to ask ourselves, what does this say about our workplace culture here? Susan shifted nervously in her seat, her face turning red. Daryl glanced at her for a moment before looking back at everyone. It's not just about me. It's about everyone who walks through these doors. Not every customer may fit the stereotype you have of someone who buys a luxury car. One of the young sales employees hesitantly raised his hand, or rather nodded his head, saying, "Go ahead." The employee spoke with obvious fear. Mr. Carter, I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make certain assumptions, or rather, I understand that. I understand. We all have biases, whether we want to admit it or not, but it's not just about trying. We have to consciously confront those biases. We have to create an environment where everyone feels respected, regardless of their appearance, background, or anything else. Pause briefly, then continue. This agency earned its reputation for excellence not only from the cars we sell, but from the experience we deliver. Going forward, that experience will focus on respect, inclusivity, and fairness. The whispers of agreement began to rise, but there were still some apprehensive faces. Daryl looked again at Susan, who seemed frozen in place, her hand gripping the notepad tightly. He said in a calm but firm tone, "Susan, I want to give you a chance to speak. Do you have anything you'd like to say?" All eyes turned to her. She hesitated for a moment, then said in a soft voice, "I made a mistake. I misjudged you, and for that, I am truly sorry." Daryl nodded, his expression neutral. "Thank you for admitting that, and I hope this experience serves as a reminder to all of us, not just to you, that change begins with taking responsibility." Then he addressed everyone. "We will begin implementing new training programs to ensure that this agency reflects the values I believe in. Every client deserves to be treated with dignity, without exceptions. If anyone has a problem with that, Now is the time to speak up. Silence filled the room, and no one dared to speak. Daryl let the silence linger for a moment, then said confidently, "Good. It seems we all agree. Change is not always easy, but it is necessary, and this agency will lead change by example." He stepped closer to the table, put his hands on it, and said in a deep voice, "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I want to understand the culture I've inherited. How can we improve it?" Then he looked again at Susan and said in a softer tone, "Susan, you are an experienced manager, and I am confident that you have worked hard to get here. But today was a wake-up call for all of us." Susan finally raised her head and looked at him with teary eyes. "I understand. I was wrong, and I will do whatever it takes to fix that." Daryl gave a slight smile and said, "I believe in second chances, but responsibility comes first. I will meet with you privately to discuss the next steps. For now, let's focus on moving forward." Then he addressed everyone again. "We don't just sell cars, we build trust, create relationships, and set a standard for excellence. If you are committed to that, I am here to support you every step of the way." The hall was filled with murmurs of agreement, this time more genuine. The employees felt relieved as the atmosphere of tension began to fade, replaced by a true desire for change. Even Alex, still by the door, nodded in agreement. Dari gave a faint smile, showing both relief and determination. "All right, let's get back to work. Remember, the way we treat people is much more important than anything we sell." The employees began to leave the hall, but Susan stopped at the door and shyly approached him. "Mr. Carter," she said in a low voice, "thank you for giving me a chance to be better. I won't let you down." Dari looked at her for a moment, then replied in a steady tone, "I hope you're serious about that, Susan. Actions speak louder than words, but I believe people can change if they want to." Susan nodded sincerely. "I will." He watched her. Dari leaves before turning to Alex, saying, "Let's meet with the team next week. I want everyone to be clear about my expectations for the future." He smiled. Alex smiled admiringly. "Yes, boss." As Dari returned to the showroom, he gazed at the cars sparkling under the sunlight. He considered the work ahead, but ultimately felt optimistic. It wasn't just about running a car dealership, but about building an environment where people are respected for who they are, not for how they look. Dari was ready to lead this change.